Welcome to another episode of TechTalk Dudes. This is actually the first episode of season 3, if memory serves me well. And yeah, again, welcome for joining. And as you always know, we are trying to cover the most exciting developments when it comes to identity-related technology and also to security or management. And today we are covering an exciting topic which is currently in preview, which is authentication strengths as part of Azure Active Directory. And Pim, welcome. I've been heard about authentication strengths, and it's, I believe, part of conditional access. And I'm curious about what authentication strengths actually is, what it does, and what actually the value add is of using authentication strengths. So happy to talk in this tech talk with you, Pim, about this topic.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ronnie, and indeed welcome everyone to a next episode. As Ronnie already explained, we're going to talk about authentication strengths and how that relates and cooperates actually with conditional access. And what's maybe good to start with is, of course, that that's where I see one of the big advantages of authentication strength, but there are way more. Over the past years, we of course talked together about passwordless on events, and some of those we did individually, some of those we did together. Passwordless is really great. It's more secure, and it's more user-friendly because the user doesn't need to type in their password anymore. But there was never ever a way to say to users, okay, you're now enforced to do and to use a passwordless method, which could either be Windows Hello for Business, which could be FIDO keys, which could be passwordless push notifications on the Authenticator app. So those methods are passwordless, and we weren't able to force them. So we were with our company, we encouraged each user to do it, but there was never a way to enforce it. Now with authentication strengths, that's going to differ, because I basically can build my own strength. Let's say I can do passwordless push notifications, I can do security keys, I can do Windows Hello for Business, and I use a temporary access pass, of course, to bootstrap those methods. That's only what I do allow to let my end users use to access my resources and access my valuable assets. So that's what I can do. But on the other hand, if passwordless is not a thing you're focusing on right now, I seriously highly suggest you to do so. But if that's not something you're focusing on right now, you could also make differences between the security level of access in terms of applications. So I just talked about passwordless, but another way what we can do with authentication strengths is improve the access security to valuable and sensitive applications within a company, which don't allow, for example, voice and SMS calls to get in, but as a second factor, but do allow regular number matching notifications of the Authenticator app to get into the application. So it opens up a broad range of options which you would be able to use, and it's simply more secure than just the require MFA checkbox. That's in very simple words.
So actually, it's a more granular way and make a distinction whether you are accessing sensitive applications or sensitive data. So you can enforce a more stronger authentication method or a combination. One thing which generally comes to my mind is, how can you identify whether an application is sensitive or data is sensitive? Is that also something you are defining in the authentication strengths? Is that something like a custom attribute, or how do you flag sensitive applications or sensitive data?
That's a very good question. Well, tagging them individually is, as you may know, not very helpful. So within conditional access, there are ways to group those apps and to target them only to filtered apps. Maybe that's the right wording. So you could, for example, put an attribute on a particular app and then say, I'm going to filter on it. I can show that to you in a minute. And those are custom, if I'm not mistaken, those are custom security attributes. And those custom security attributes can then be put onto the application. And then within the cloud apps or actions within conditional access, you can filter on them and then say, if that particular attribute is called sensitive, for example, and then all your apps which are tagged with that attribute and the value sensitive are included in that particular conditional access policy. And of course, within the grant controls, you would then be able to use authentication strengths.
Okay.
And select the method you're using. I can, shall I show my screen and show you a bit more on how to configure that? And then if there is time left, we can, of course, check the filter.
Sure, happy to see the how that works and how all the pieces and dots comes together.
Okay, let me share my screen and let me know if you can see it.
Yes, it's clear to me. I can see your screen.
Well, this is my tenant, as everybody I think who's watching already knows. So within Azure AD, and yes, I'm still using the Azure AD portal. I'm not using the Entra portal. It's getting used to new methods and losing your old habits. We can go to security. We can go to conditional access, and within here we have authentication strengths, as you can see.
Yeah.
In here, I'm able to use the built-in authentication strengths, which are called multi-factor authentication, passwordless MFA, phishing-resistant MFA. Those are just ways to get you started. So Microsoft has already predefined some of them, which you're not able to edit. As you can see, you can duplicate them, but you cannot edit them. This is just how it is by design. And you can also see if the policy is already applied to one of those one of the conditional access policies. Now, what we can also we can also see, if we can click on view, which methods within this particular authentication strength are actually allowed. So in here we see, of course, I think those are pretty much all methods which are available. But if we, for example, let's pick the passwordless MFA one, and if I click on view, I can see 4 of them are allowed. So phone sign-in, certificate-based, FIDO, Windows Hello for Business. That's what's by default available for passwordless. Now, this is not really helpful. At least my opinion is this is not really helpful, because there is no way, if you would enforce this on your tenant level, and that's what I've done on my actual business account, so not within this tenant, but the company where I work for. There is no way to bootstrap your passwordless methods. So what I actually did is I built my own authentication strength. So you can easily hit new authentication strength. You can say test for TechTalk, for example. You can put in a description, and then you can easily hit checkboxes. You can say Windows Hello, FIDO, top, one-time, and multi-use. Those are separate. We can say, where is it? Phone sign in, password. There it is. And we can hit this one. Now, then if we go to the next screen, we can see I've added Windows Hello for Business, both of the tabs, FIDO and phone sign in. And that's what if I hit create, it's actually immediately creating those that particular custom authentication strength, and at that point in time, you're able to use it in a conditional access policy.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, can you also add these policies to multiple conditional access policies, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I only see one in the view, but that's more, cosmetic, I guess.
It's indeed cosmetic because I didn't apply it on another one. Now, if I then go to users and groups, this is conditional access, and I say test out strength, and I'm not sure if this already exists. So, TechTalk. So let's make sure it doesn't exist. I can include the user. In this case, I created a user account. Specifically for this, I can say all cloud apps in this example, but what I can also do, as what Ronnie just referred to, is I can edit the filter. So in my case, I'm going to apply a passwordless grant control in a minute. But what I can also say is I create a custom strength for sensitive apps, and I can use custom security attributes to target on an application, and then fill that custom security attribute with a particular value, and then include those particular apps within this conditional access policy to make it more dynamic. All right, that's not what we're going to do. I'm just hitting all cloud apps just for the sake of the demo and to keep things easy for now. Yeah, you can configure some conditions. So any location, I want to have that from any device. Now, this is what you can customize based on your own needs. And then more important, within the grant controls, you can see there is a switch called require authentication strength. And in here in the drop-down, I can simply select the ones this is really ugly. The one I created should be listed somewhere down here, but I don't really understand why I'm not seeing that yet. Maybe I need to refresh. Yes, let's refresh in this, because it should be visible in there to select it. There it is. So it's just a refresh on my screen. So test for TechTalk, I can select that one. And as you then can see, also the require MFA checkbox is going to grayed out. And this switch is automatically going to all selected controls. You cannot switch back anymore to one of the selected controls. So I would recommend to only use this in a policy, and not going to do, yeah, you can do this, but I rather won't. I don't. Now we can select, let's build this back in how it was, because that's of course with the refresh things which have been lost.
By the way, can you also combine these policies? I saw it is only an OR statement, but is it possible to have an AND statement or combine multiple authentication strengths with a single policy? Or is there also conflict handling with the least restrictive or most restrictive password authentication strength?
That's a good question. I wouldn't advise you to combine them. During the preview, even people said, and that was once it still was private, don't combine it with require MFA authentication. Well, that works right now. But combining them and making an overlap is also going to overcomplicate things.
Absolutely. So yeah, keep it simple.
So it should be it definitely should be secure, and zero trust is important and defense in depth. But if you're going to create 100 access pools with 100, I mean, you cannot create that much authentication strengths. But with a lot of authentication strengths, then it already gets really complicated.
Yeah. So I say that designing kind of a strategy for applying authentication policies there, like you're also doing for your conditional access policies, is definitely recommended.
Yeah, what would be a great start for people is if you have require MFA, yeah, and you want to get rid of particular methods or don't want to use particular methods anymore, replace that with an authentication strength. So build your own custom authentication strength and implement that one. Well, I've now built, and I'm going back, of course, to the I've just created this particular conditional access policy with the authentication strength with a test account included. And what I now can do, and then I need to reshare my screen, which I will do right now because that's on a different window. That's this one. I can sign in with this test account. Now, if I would sign in with my password, if I'm not mistaken, because I just created this account, this should be my password. My default method is number matching, and there could still be a delay in this between applying the conditional access policy and signing in. So that's indeed the case. So sometimes you need to wait, but in the end, what you will see is if you then sign in with, so because otherwise we perhaps need to wait 5 to 10 minutes. What you would see is if you sign on with a password and you do, for example, SMS. That's something we can try right now. See if that does work. SMS is not a method in my environment.
So you're well educated in your environment. You're practicing it yourself quite well.
But then it would prompt you to say, well, this is something you cannot use. But you can use your FIDO key. You can use your you can use the passwordless phone sign-in method in your
Windows Hello, or you can use
indeed, and that those methods are that's something you can that's something you're able to use and apply in your tenant. So that's actually the way the way it works. What's good to know is if you're applying an authentication strength in your tenant, and you haven't set, and the user hasn't set up any of those methods, you're ending up in a loop. So it's always wise, and my advice is always make sure that you at least have added temporary access pass in your authentication strength, and that could either be a one-time use or a multi-use. That's up for the IT admin, of course, to decide.
Yeah.
But that way, that's the only way to get out of that particular loop.
Yeah.
Because basically, it's trying to look up a method which is not there. So then it's endlessly looping.
That's a chicken egg story then.
Yeah, that's also written. It's also written on the docs. It's it's a known issue, and they are working on. As far as I know, they are working on it. So that's something
to keep in mind.
Which I hope will be fixed really soon, but also to keep in mind indeed, and to make sure there is also a way out, there is always a way out for the end user, and in this case that would be a temporary access pass.
Yeah. Hey, now you showed it with an internal user. I'm assuming it's also applicable to external users, for example, external identities.
Yeah, for sure. You can use authentication strengths also for your guest accounts. But there are some important things which you should think of, because you can use MFA on your guest account, as in voice, SMS, FIDO keys. Those things is something you can enable on your guest account. But what you cannot enable on your guest account is passwordless sign in from the Authenticator app. So in some cases, there are some examples in which you need to make a cross-tenant access trust, and then trust the home
tenant.
Yes, exactly. The MFA registered in the home tenant of the user, because that's where it can do passwordless. So that's important to note and important to take care of. But you would be able to configure a generic authentication strength for your B2B users to literally ban methods you won't want to use in your tenant.
Okay. Oh, it sounds logic, but these are, I think, the catches you must be aware of, because this yeah, to me, it's taking your authentication methods and the way how you authenticate and access your resources to the next level. It's more granular. But yeah, these kind of things, like the loop you mentioned, but also taking care of when you are applying this to guest users, that you have also some requirements in the home tenant that they should support these kind of passwordless methods.
Yeah, but in those examples, you most likely would know or already work with that organization and know they have those security controls in place. And for all the and for those, you could eventually make a separate conditional access policy, because and that's then maybe helpful to show, because otherwise it doesn't perhaps make any sense. But if you go back to the inclusion of users, you can of course select the type of users, the guest external user types, but you could also say I select the Azure AD organization this applies to. And in here I can say Microsoft, for example, and I would be able to say, okay, all folks of Microsoft can I allow authentication in my tenant, but only the one we just created.
So, yeah, but then you can also filter out some organizations which are more trustworthy or not, or include or exclude.
Yeah. Correct. So that's a way how you can work more secure with B2B and other organizations. And you could of course also make one generic. Oh, that's the wrong place. One generic one which you apply for all the external or Azure AD organizations or B2B accounts.
Wow, so that's and this is also part of default conditional access, not tied into an P1 or P2. It's just straight functionality of Azure AD.
Well, conditional access is of course part of P1. So you need Azure AD Premium P1, and with P1 you also have the ability to use authentication strengths. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, interesting topic, Pim. I really liked your explanation, and also, at least to me, it's more clear what it entails, and now I can position it, and the value add is also clear to me, and taking my security posture to the next level to make sure that my crown jewels are accessed in the proper way. Cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, man. Really enjoyed it.
You're very welcome, and I hope everyone enjoyed it, and start configuring authentication strengths and protect your valuable assets.
Yeah. Hey, thanks again. Thank you all. Thank you for joining, and looking forward to see you next time to a next Tech Talk episode, dudes.
Thank you, and see you next time. Bye-bye.